Hi guys, so today's kind of a chill day, but I wanted to do a vlog, and today I'm going to talk about breastfeeding. So I made the choice to breastfeed, and it's been a really good thing. I've actually found it so much easier than any kind of formula stuff. And we did do a little formula mixed in with breast milk at the start because Grace was a preemie and she did need a little bit extra to boost her and help her grow a bit more because she was tiny. And I really have to say that just breastfeeding her was so much easier than mixing up formula. And it took a little while for her to get the hang of it. She had a hard time latching on at first and things like that. But once she got the hang of it, it made life so much easier, and it was a really great thing. So lately, breastfeeding has been all over the place, and it's caused some heated debates, which I don't personally understand, mostly because I don't see what the big deal is about breastfeeding my child out in public. Now, that being said, there are things that I have learned that have made it easier for me to feed Grace in public. And I know these don't work for everybody, but I think most breastfeeding mothers feel the same way about some of them. So first of all, when people say, hey, just go feed her or him in the bathroom, that's gross. Some bathrooms do have a little sitting area, but you're talking about places where, you know, the toilet flushing causes spray, and there are so many people who don't wash their hands after they go to the bathroom, and they're touching the door handles, and they're touching the counters, and if they decide to sit and wait for someone, they're touching the areas you're sitting in, if there's a sitting area. So there's just so many ways that someone's non-washed hands from going to the bathroom can touch where you're touching and then feeding your child, and that just makes me really uncomfortable. Just like I don't want to go sit down and eat in a bathroom for the same reasons. It's just, to me, it's not sanitary to eat or try to ingest food in a place where excrement lives. So I know, and I also find most of the people who have problems with breastfeeding in public or say something about breastfeeding in public are women who either A, don't have children, or B, thought that breastfeeding was gross and therefore did not breastfeed their children. Women who either A, breastfeed their children, or B, couldn't breastfeed their children but wanted to, are much more understanding. Now, I like to try to pick kind of a out of the way spot because Grace gets distracted by the sounds around her. So if I'm in a very busy area feeding her, she's constantly wanting to look and see what's going on. So she's not eating because she's more distracted by the sounds and what's going on, and that means she's not staying latched on. Now, when I'm out in public, I throw a blanket over her. Grace doesn't really like that very much, and we go out a lot, but I don't tend to breastfeed her when we're out. And so she's gotten very used to, and that's because she's eating solid foods, but now she's gotten very used to just not having anything covering her and just eating and able to kind of look around and look at me, and she doesn't like being covered by the blanket. I actually like feeding her in the car. To me, it's worth the 15-20 minutes that the car is running while we're parked and feeding her in the car. She does it really well. She can still look at me and look around. She's not being distracted by everything going on around her. And it just gives us kind of a little cocoon that I'm able to feed her in. So I like doing that when we're out in public. And I know that doesn't make a lot, there's other women who that's very uncomfortable for, and I can understand how it would be. But for me, that works really well. Now, when she was young, she was only 2-3 months old, we went to the State Fair of Texas, and I was breastfeeding, and so I was breastfeeding her while we were there. And when we were there, I tried to find little areas that were just kind of out of the way to feed her. Again, more so that there wasn't a whole lot of noise to distract her from feeding than from really trying to cause or not cause discomfort for other people. So if you've ever been to the State Fair of Texas, you know that the Cotton Bowl is kind of the center of the fair, and you can walk all the way around it. But a lot of people don't walk the back way. They like walking on the main road areas because you can see more. So I went back, and my husband was there with me every time, and he would help me and hold up the blanket, and I would start feeding her. And I'm just sitting on the steps of the Cotton Bowl out of the way. And what I found I kind of looked around to see what people's reactions were, because it's kind of obvious when you're holding a blanket that way, a baby under the blanket, it's obvious what you're doing. And what I found was the kids were completely oblivious. Children were completely oblivious to what I was doing. And there were a couple of women who just gave me these looks like, that's kind of inappropriate. Didn't say a single thing, glanced, had a quick judgment look on their face, and kept going. But what I saw most were moms and dads who had kids, either babies in strollers or young kids, and the moms looked and just kind of smiled at me. They understood I was feeding my child, and they moved on about their day. But the thing that was amazing to me is the look on the dads' faces, and you could tell which dads were dads of kids that were breastfed, because they would look at you and smile, and then they start looking at their wife, and they're seeing you feeding your child, and there's nothing about you that's drawing them to you or trying to steal you away from their wife or anything. And then they look back at their wives with such admiration, because she nurtured their children like that, and you could see him remembering that she did that. And over again, every time that a male passed, noticed, and had a family, it was the same thing. And so when you have all these people who are talking so badly about breastfeeding and how inappropriate it is in public, my experience, I've had a couple women who mention that it's inappropriate or show disdain on their face because I'm doing it. And men are either awkward and don't know what to do, or you can see that they're reminiscing about their wife feeding their children that way, or that a future child is going to be fed that way. And it's a really beautiful thing to do that. So now that Grace is older, when we're in public, she does not like a blanket covering her face at all. She wants to see what's going on around her while she's feeding. So I do go to more secluded places. I try to go to a back room somewhere if I'm at a house or an apartment. And in public, I just feed her in the car because it's easier. I do that because it's easier for me and for Grace, because she's not distracted. She's able to eat. We're able to keep going and doing what we're doing. But I don't see any sort of big deal about breastfeeding in public, with or without a cover. I understand why the child gets uncomfortable under the cover. And it's a pain to keep it on your shoulder. Even with the clippy things and all the stuff that they make now, it can be very frustrating. So, in my experience, at the end of the day, a lot of the people who don't like that you're breastfeeding in public are women who don't plan on having children, or women who think that breastfeeding is gross, and so they were not going to breastfeed their children. And everyone's allowed to have their own opinion, that's fine. But the most interesting thing for me, as far as breastfeeding goes, is actually talking to men about it. Having this discussion with my husband. Yes, breasts have been sexualized by our culture, but just because they're sexualized doesn't mean that they are always sexualized. The fact that I can breastfeed my child, when I'm feeding my child, they are a source of food. That's it. There is nothing sexualized about it. It's a separate thing. And I don't know why some people can't separate that. But so when you have these men who, that's a nurturing thing for their children, and they've seen that, and it brings back good memories and good thoughts to them. So that's one thing. But when I was talking to my husband before I really started breastfeeding, and talking to my brother-in-law and just any male that would really have a conversation with me, the number one thing that men said wasn't that they thought it was disgusting. It was that they didn't want to make the woman feel uncomfortable, because it's something that we don't do. It's something that we don't see. It's taboo in our society. I still don't understand why, but it's taboo in our society. So males who are just genuinely curious, they're just curious as to how it works and what it is. And they'll take a double take, because sometimes they see it and they don't realize what they're seeing, and then they look away. But the number one issue that every male I have spoken with about it said was not that they thought it was disgusting, not that they thought it was something sexual, nothing like that. It was that they were worried that they were going to make the mother uncomfortable because they were staring too long and not meaning to. That's it. So are there perverts out there that it's something completely different? Are there people who just have a fetish and they nursing is their thing? Yes, and as long as they're not harming anyone else, then, you know, let them do their thing. But I don't see a big deal about breastfeeding. In fact, I think it's a big deal that women aren't breastfeeding when they can. If you have a good supply of milk, feed your kid with your boobs. It's not that big of a deal in the sense of where you are and get over it, but you're doing so much to help your kid by breastfeeding them. It helps fight malnutrition. It helps give them all sorts of antibodies from your body that they didn't get fully during the pregnancy because you may not have had a reaction to something during that time. It makes a big difference in the life of your child. It is an amazing bonding experience. And you know what? If you can't produce enough milk, that's okay too. That doesn't make you a bad mother. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means that your body's having a hard time with something, and that's okay too. So if you liked this video or any of my other videos, please hit like and share. Please leave comments. Tell me how you feel about breastfeeding. Do you feel like I do, that it's a good thing and it's not that big of a deal? Or do you feel like it makes something that makes people really uncomfortable? And what are some of your solutions? What can we do to help make it a better environment for women to be able to breastfeed in public in a way that is both considerate of those around them and easy and clean and sanitary for themselves and their baby? As always, please subscribe. Go Texas Rangers. Woo! I love my Rangers. The season's about to start and my phone's blowing up with preseason games I'm really excited about.